everyone, welcome to my Tanking 101 video for World of Warcraft. So this video is really meant for people who are getting into the tanking role for the very first time, or who've tanked once or twice but still want to learn a little bit more about what the role really is. So, well, tanking in itself is, it's a pretty rewarding experience, but I think that's pretty obvious, but just note, just to be aware that it can sometimes be a very thankless experience, especially if you're around ignorant players or if you're around impatient healers and DPS who just go ahead and pull everything in sight in an instance without even asking whether you can actually take it on, or without even asking whether you actually know the mechanics of any fight. So yeah, that can be tough. It can also be tough when you're repair builds because you do take most of the hits as a tank. Especially when you wipe. So, but yeah, there are a lot of positive sides to it. You normally dictate the pace of the instance run, and overall the feeling of being able to tank an instance is it's a pretty great feeling. It's a really good role to be in. Obviously, queues are faster as a tank, so it is really a good role to get in. So for this video, I will be dividing it into 4 parts. So at least from my point of view, there should be 4 aspects that are important for tanks. One is learning your class. Second is being fully aware of everything that's happening around you, especially in an instance run. Third, well, I just put it in there. It's threat management, although it isn't much of an issue. And fourth, and very important, is being able to communicate. So communication is very important in your dungeon or raid groups. So without further ado, let's get to the part where you have to learn your class. So learning your class, and part of learning your class is to actually try to level your character as a tank. First of all, even while questing, try to use the tank spec once in a while and just round up those mobs and just try to tank them. And once in a while check how you can manage your cooldowns while your health goes low, so you can really know what it's like, especially once you enter instances. Now, while you're leveling, it's really important that you tank instances. Not only do you get faster queues for that, it's just simply to get the feel of things. Even even though you have fewer skills compared to a max level tank of any class, it's just important that you're able to get the feel of tanking as early as possible. So that's the first thing about learning your class. If you can, tank dungeons as much as you can while leveling, and also while questing, if there are a lot of mobs, use your tank spec. The second thing about learning your class is that you really have to read up on your class. You have to go through your spell book and just read through your abilities and know how they really work. I would also advise watching videos just like this one, just to learn more about what tanking is all about, and then eventually go into specific videos for your class. You can't just leave it all to chance. You really have to know and learn more and more about your class. It's kind of hard going into an instance and not knowing which skill to push or which cooldown to use. So that's tip number 2 for learning for just being learning how to tank. You have got to research more about your class. In addition to researching your class and knowing its abilities, really in depth, is that you also have to research your dungeons and the raids that you want to get to. You can't just rely on the dungeon journal that's within the game. It sorely lacks in detail and information. I strongly suggest that you read up from different websites and from different videos on how dungeon fights and how raids should go. And sometimes some of them will offer tips on how to make things easier for you. So that's number 3. In addition to learning your class and your abilities, you also have to look up and get more information on the different instances in World of Warcraft. Fourth is, well, in addition to learning your class, is that you also have to understand your stats, and you have to understand how to prioritize them. For most tanks, bonus armor is really a good stat, but there is, of course, you have your tank, a tank like a Guardian Druid who might value stamina a little bit higher than bonus armor, but I'm not really sure how that plays out because although stamina gives healers some room for error, It also stresses them out since you're not mitigating damage as much as you should be, just to ease or to make it easier for the healer to just heal through damage. Yeah, but the fourth thing is just basically you have to understand your stats. It sucks that they took out reforging. That was a really good thing in Miss of Pandaria and I think in Cataclysm. But yeah, right now you're subject to RNG. You have to swap out gear if you want to get a little bit more mastery. Let's say another stat like that. Yeah, you have to swap out gear. Or if you're crafting, you have to keep crafting, or you have to re-roll the stats on it. Even then, you really aren't assured of the stat you prefer. But anyway, you have to understand your stats as a tank. The last thing that's really important for learning your class is managing your cooldowns and knowing when to pop them. If you're running with geared healers or healers that really know or know when to expect a spike in damage, that's fine. You're good. You can relax. But it's not always like that, and sometimes your healer may not always be in the right position to heal you or to send out that big heal that you need so much. You have to be ready to hit that panic button. In this case, it could be your shield wall ability or bark skin, or I don't know. It really depends on the class. One other thing about that is make sure you stagger your defensive CDs or separate them. Don't macro them into one button. If all you're expecting is physical damage, then of course use a CD that works well against physical damage. If it's magic in nature, then of course use a CD that helps stop magic damage. So that's the last bit. Make sure you're able to manage your cooldowns properly. Once you've learned as much as you can about your class, in addition to the instances that you plan to tank, the second thing you have to be really good at is being aware of everything that's happening around you. And the first thing that you have to do to be aware of your surroundings is basically being able to zoom out your camera view as far as possible to see everything that's happening. You can't just rely on a very limited amount of vision while you're tanking. You have to be able to know whether new mobs have spawned somewhere in the dungeon or in the raid, or whether your healer is actually trying to run away from something. If you're not on Vent or TeamSpeak or some other way of communication, you won't be able to know that sometimes. And typing can be a hassle, so you have to be able to see what's actually happening in an instance. So the important thing here is that you're able to zoom out your camera as far as possible. The second thing that can help you with your awareness is marking your kill targets, especially in council type fights or in fights where there are multiple mobs around. While you can do that, you can ask a raid group member to do that for you. It helps if you're able to do that yourself. Marking your kill targets or marking the kill order, whether you want one specific mob to go down first and then the next one, marking one with an X or a square or a skull, it really helps to keep things organized. Yeah, so that's the second thing that can help you with awareness, especially since as I advised, that you have your camera distance zoomed out so far. Marking kill targets that way makes it easier for you to identify who you should be taking down first or who you should just be tanking, and while the raid group is just focused on the other one. So mark your kill targets, especially in multi-mob or multi-boss scenarios. The third thing about awareness is that you have to pay attention to everyone's health bars, but more importantly, you have to pay attention to your healer's health bar, especially his resource bar. When moving from one trash pack to another, you just have to make sure that your healer has enough ammo to keep you alive. So don't just go ahead and pull everything in sight. Make sure your healer's fine, is not in any danger, and especially watch for his resource bar. If it's kind of low, you might want to ask him or her, just do you want to drink first? Take in some stuff to get your mana back up, so stuff like that. So watch your healer's resource bar. One thing that can help you with awareness is just simply doing the silver proving grounds. From my point of view, it's not really something that checks whether you can take damage or how much damage you can take. It's more on just a test on your awareness of things that are happening around you, watching the damage dealer or the healer's health bar versus the mobs that are moving towards your DPS, your healer. So it's A number of people really don't like the idea of silver proving grounds just to be able to get into heroics, but yeah, it's a good check on your awareness. After learning your class and working on your awareness of your surroundings while tanking instances, uh, the third thing that's important for tanks, it's not a big issue now, unlike in previous expansions, is threat management. So I just want to remind you that you're not, unless you're geared, your goal is not to top the DPS charts. Your goal is to top the threat charts, and you should always be on top of your threat meters, unless you're not the one assigned to tank that boss, or you should be swapping to a different target. Um, if you're running with hunters or other pet classes like a warlock, just make sure to remind them to turn off their pet's taunt ability, unless the mechanic requires that the pet takes on a different mob and it's not you who's assigned to tank it. But if you're the only tank, make sure to remind the pet classes to turn off their pet's taunts. Just in case you were wondering, your threat generation is largely based on the damage you do and very much affected by your mastery. So I believe, if I'm not mistaken, all classes, whether you're a warrior, a monk, or a paladin, or etc., your mastery affects the amount of attack power you have. So I think it's around 10 or 12%. It could be 12%. I think that's the figure. But yeah, so if you're wondering about that, your threat can be modified by your mastery. So for the last thing, you could have done all the research you should have done. You could be fully aware of everything, and you could be, constantly just on top of the threat charts. But it's very important that you're able to communicate with your healer, with your damage dealers. You have to be able to communicate if you plan to do something different from the norm, from the standard way of doing or handling a dungeon or a raid. If let's say there are multiple mobs, you have to be able to communicate to maybe one of your people in the raid group, hey, could you crowd control this particular one? Or if there's a particular mechanic that has been, if you've noticed that one mechanic in a fight has always caused problems for everyone, you should be able to remind everyone in the group that, to watch out for that particular mechanic. So the fourth important thing for a tank is to be able to communicate and listen to your group mates. And there you have it. Those are what I feel are the four things that are important for any tank. Is that well, number one is that you learn your class as much as you can. Second is that you're fully aware of your surroundings. Third is that you're always on top in terms of threat. And fourth is you're able to communicate and listen to your raid group. I want to add that add-ons can actually make your life a whole lot easier. So I'll be linking some add-ons, some suggestions in the video description below. But right now I want to suggest a few. The first one is Deadly Boss Mods. That's DBM. It just really helps you. It gives you messages in your screen, some sound effects to remind you whether certain mechanics of the fight are up. Second thing is Omen or Skada if you want to manage your threat, and Skada also helps you manage your DPS, or just watch or measures your DPS in case you decide to switch over to a damage dealer role. Third would be TellMeWhen. It's helps you watch those important abilities that you want to know whether they're on cooldown or whether they can be used. And fourth is basically the UI I'm using right now. It's Elvui. It's been my UI of choice ever since Mists of Pandaria. So as I mentioned, I'll be linking all these in the description below. But overall, for this tanking 101 video, I hope you got something out of it, and I hope you enjoyed. Please subscribe.